The broken dishwasher shouldn't have been my breaking point, but kneeling in greasy water, counting tip money to fix something that wasn't my responsibility, while my stepsister threw her knockoff bag onto my freshly cleaned counter, that's when I knew my life had become a prison. I'm Emma, and this is how I transformed from family doormat to a woman standing on her own 2 feet. At 26, I worked 2 jobs in a dying Pennsylvania steel town. Mornings at the diner from 5 a.m., slinging coffee to plant workers, my feet constantly aching and hair permanently scented with bacon grease. Afternoons at the public library until 8, shelving books and fixing ancient computers. Every dollar went to keeping our household afloat. After my stepfather's heart attack 3 years ago, I became the sole provider. My mother Sharon worked sporadically as a dental receptionist, but her paychecks vanished on maintaining middle-class appearances. My stepsister Jessica, 28, didn't work at all, just slept late, took Instagram selfies, and dated her wealthy boyfriend Preston. Our modest split level desperately needed updates. I had the smallest bedroom, barely fitting a twin bed and dresser. Jessica occupied the master suite with the bathroom she never cleaned. Sharon had redecorated her room twice this year with household money. I felt like I was drowning. I'd earned my information technology degree through 3 years of night classes, dreaming of escaping to a city where nobody knew my family history. But student debt and household obligations kept me trapped. Jessica had dropped out after 1 semester, claiming to be a freelance interior designer while doing no actual work. She posted curated photos of expensive dinners and designer clothes, all funded by Preston, whose family owned car dealerships across the tri-state area. He seemed oblivious to being used. Sharon adored Jessica. My stepsister could do no wrong, beautiful, charming, dating someone who could elevate our status. I was the constant disappointment. Sharon never missed opportunities to compare us, pointing out how Jessica presented herself, caught a successful man, made our family proud. That I paid the bills meant nothing. The dynamic was toxic, but I told myself it was temporary. Once I saved enough, paid down loans, found the right opportunity, I'd leave and start fresh. I just had to endure a little longer. That particular day started normally. I worked a double shift at the diner covering for a sick coworker, earning extra tips but missing my library shift. Arriving home at 9 p.m., exhausted and reeking of old coffee, I found the kitchen flooded. The dishwasher had finally died, water seeping across linoleum into hallway carpet. Sharon was playing bingo. Jessica was upstairs preparing for a Preston date. Neither had turned off the water or thrown down towels. I spent an hour mopping, another hour diagnosing the problem via YouTube videos. The pump had burned out a $200 repair. Money we didn't have because Sharon spent our emergency fund on living room curtains. So there I was, counting 20s from my tip jar money saved for new work shoes, since mine had holes, preparing to call a repairman. That's when Jessica came downstairs in a tight red dress and heels, makeup perfect, hairstyled. She barely glanced at me, kneeling in dirty water, and tossed her purse contemptuously onto the counter. "Still playing Cinderella, Emma?" she mocked. "Moms right, some people are just born to serve others." I looked up, hands wet and pruned, clothes soaked, and something inside me cracked. Not broke yet, but cracked. I swallowed my anger and returned to mopping. Jessica laughed sharply and left to meet Preston, trailing expensive perfume. That night, lying in bed, staring at water-stained ceiling, I imagined a different life. One where I wasn't the family maid, where hard work was appreciated, where I could pursue dreams without guilt. It felt like fantasy, unreachable as the moon. But everything was about to change. 3 weeks later, I received an email that made my heart race. A tech company in Austin, Texas, cybersecurity startup, wanted to offer me a junior developer position I'd applied for months ago and forgotten about. The salary was more than double my current combined income, with health insurance, paid vacation, and relocation assistance. They wanted me in 6 weeks. I read it 5 times, certain I was misunderstanding. They were offering me a way out, a future. I spent days alternating between euphoria and terror. Austin felt impossibly far from Pennsylvania, a city I'd only seen in pictures, full of young professionals and opportunities I could barely imagine. But it meant leaving everything familiar, abandoning Sharon and Jessica to figure out finances without my income. Guilt sat heavy in my chest, yet deeper than guilt was fierce, burning hope. For the first time in years, I saw a path forward that didn't involve sacrificing myself for people who didn't appreciate me. I could build a career, make real money, maybe even buy my own place. Become the person I was meant to be, not who my family decided I should be. I decided to tell them over dinner. I'd cook something special, present the news positively, explain this was an opportunity I couldn't pass up. I hoped they'd at least try to be supportive. How naive that hope was. I spent my day off shopping for ingredients with carefully hoarded savings. I found a recipe for honey glazed chicken with roasted vegetables, cleaned the house top to bottom, set the table with good dishes, bought cheap wine to make it celebratory. Sharon came home first around 5, looking surprised. "What's all this?" she asked suspiciously. "I wanted to make us a nice dinner." I have news to share. Her eyes narrowed. What kind of news? Good news. I'll tell you when Jessica gets here. Jessica arrived 30 minutes later, complaining about traffic and criticizing the food's smell before seeing it. She was in a bad mood. I'd later learn Preston had canceled their plans for a business dinner with his father. We sat down. For a few minutes, there was relative peace. The chicken turned out well, golden and fragrant. Even Sharon grudgingly admitted it wasn't bad. I poured wine, hands trembling with nerves, then cleared my throat. I wanted to tell you both something. I got a job offer, a really good one. It's for a tech company in Austin, Texas. They want me to start in about 6 weeks. The words hung in the air. I watched comprehension dawn on their faces. Sharon's expression shifted from confusion to alarm to anger. Jessica's face went blank, then twisted into something ugly. Texas? Sharon's voice rose. You're planning to move to Texas? It's an amazing opportunity, Mom. The salary is really good. They're helping with relocation costs. This is exactly the kind of job I went to school for. I can finally start building a real career. Jessica started laughing harshly. Austin? You think those tech nerds are going to give a damn about some small-town girl like you? And who's going to pay the electric bill when you're gone? My face flushed with anger and shame. This is my life, Jessica. I've been supporting this household for 3 years. I deserve a chance to do something for myself. You deserve? Jessica's voice went shrill. You know what you deserve? To stay right here where you belong, doing what you do best, taking care of the people who actually matter. Before I could respond, Jessica deliberately knocked over her wine glass. Red liquid splashed across the table and onto my white blouse, the only nice shirt I owned, the one I'd planned to wear for my library exit interview. Wine soaked through immediately, staining it dark crimson. Oops, Jessica said flatly. Clumsy me. Something snapped inside me. Years of biting my tongue, accepting insults and disrespect, putting their needs above my own, it all came boiling up. I stood abruptly, chair scraping back, voice loud and raw with anger. Are you out of your mind? I shouted, looking at my ruined shirt, feeling tears of frustration sting my eyes. This is the only professional shirt I have. Jessica stood too, face contorted with rage. Oh, poor Emma and her precious shirt. You want to abandon us, but I'm the bad guy? She moved toward me. I backed up instinctively, but she kept coming. Before I understood what was happening, she shoved me hard in the chest with both hands. I stumbled backward, hip hitting a side table holding a decorative vase. I tried to catch myself, but Jessica shoved me again, harder, and I tumbled over the table. I fell badly. My left arm shot out instinctively to break my fall and connected with the sharp brick edge of the fireplace hearth with a sickening crack. Pain was immediate and overwhelming, white-hot agony radiating from my forearm to my shoulder. I screamed, a sound I barely recognized as my own. Then I was on the floor, cradling my arm against my chest, tears streaming down my face. Through the pain haze, I heard Sharon's voice note asking if I was okay, not calling for help, but yelling at me. Emma, what is wrong with you? Look what you've done. Look how upset you've made Jessica. I looked up through tears, unable to believe what I was hearing. My arm was throbbing, possibly broken, and she was worried about Jessica's feelings. Mom, I gasped between sobs. I think my arm is broken. I need to go to the hospital. Sharon looked down, expression not concerned or sympathetic, but cold, calculating, irritated. Don't be so dramatic. You're fine. You're just upset because Jessica called you out on your selfishness. I can't move my arm. Please, Mom. I really think it's broken. I need help. Sharon glanced at Jessica, who stood there, breathing heavily, flushed, looking almost triumphant. Then my mother looked back at me, and what she said next I'll never forget. If you call the police, if you make this into some big thing, you will ruin your sister's future. Preston's family would never accept her if she had some kind of record. Is that what you want? To destroy her chance at happiness because you can't handle a little disagreement? I stared at her, unable to process. A little disagreement. My arm was broken, I was in agony on the floor, and she was worried about Jessica's reputation. Mom, I need a doctor, I whispered, feeling something inside me die. Sharon sighed heavily, as if I were being unreasonable. Fine, wait until morning. If it still hurts, you can go to urgent care. But you tell them you fell down the stairs. Do you understand? You fell down the stairs by yourself. No one pushed you. She didn't wait for my response. She walked to the bar cart, poured wine for herself and Jessica, and they clinked glasses while I lay on the floor, cradling my broken arm, my white shirt stained with wine, my dreams of Austin suddenly feeling impossibly far away. That night was the longest of my life. I managed to pull myself off the floor after Sharon and Jessica retreated to watch television, laughing at some sitcom like nothing had happened. I stumbled to my bedroom, every movement sending fresh waves of pain. I couldn't straighten my arm, couldn't put weight on it, and swelling was already making my skin look puffy and discolored. I knew I needed medical attention immediately, not in the morning like Sharon had dismissed. Broken bones could be serious, could lead to permanent damage if not treated properly. But more than physical pain, I was grappling with emotional devastation. My own mother had chosen Jessica over me, prioritized my stepsister's reputation over my well-being, asked me to lie to protect someone who had deliberately hurt me. Around midnight, when the house was finally quiet, I called a taxi, whispering so no one would hear. I grabbed my purse with my free hand, crept out, and directed the driver to the 24-hour emergency clinic. The young doctor who examined me was kind and professional, his face growing more concerned as he gently manipulated my arm and sent me for x-rays. The diagnosis: a fractured radius, one of the 2 forearm bones. A clean break, fortunately, but requiring a cast and at least 6 weeks of healing. The doctor asked how it happened, and I heard myself repeat Sharon's demanded lie. I fell down the stairs. He looked at me skeptically, eyes moving from my face to my arm to the wine stain still visible on my shirt. That's a pretty specific injury for a stair fall. Are you sure that's what happened? Is someone hurting you at home? For a moment, I wanted to tell him everything. I wanted to explain about Jessica's shove, about my mother's indifference, about years of emotional abuse and exploitation. But fear held me back. Fear of consequences, of making things worse, of admitting out loud that my own family cared so little about me. I fell, I repeated. And I could see disappointment in his eyes. He set my arm in a temporary splint and told me I'd need to return in a few days once swelling went down for a proper cast. The bill came to $800, even with minimal insurance from my diner job. $800 I didn't have, that would come out of meager savings I'd been setting aside for my Austin move. By the time I got home, it was almost 4 a.m. I crept back inside. The dining room had been cleaned up, the broken vase thrown away, the table reset, as if our disastrous dinner had never happened. The normalcy of it, the erasure of what had been done to me, felt like another violence. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in my narrow bed, splinted arm throbbing despite painkillers, and forced myself to think clearly. Something fundamental had shifted inside me. The naive hope that my family would eventually appreciate me, that they would change, that we could somehow become normal, and love in it had died on that dining room floor along with my dignity. For the first time, I allowed myself to feel the full weight of my anger. I had spent years serving these people, sacrificing my own happiness and opportunities to keep them comfortable, and this was how they repaid me. Jessica had assaulted me, and my mother had covered it up, threatened me into silence, made it clear I was expendable. As the sun began to rise, casting pale light through my bedroom curtains, I made a decision. I was still going to Austin. I was still going to take that job and build a new life. But before I left, I was going to make sure that Jessica and Sharon understood that their actions had consequences. I was done being the victim, done being the family doormat. If they wanted to treat me like I didn't matter, then I would show them exactly what happened when you push someone too far. I would be strategic, patient, and thorough. I would gather evidence, make plans, and when the time was right, I would act. They had broken more than just my arm. They had broken the last thread of loyalty that bound me to them. And for that, there would be a reckoning. Over the next few days, I moved through the house like a ghost. My arm ached constantly, and the splint made simple tasks difficult, but I forced myself to maintain my usual routine. I went to work at the diner, learning to carry trays one-handed, deflecting coworker questions with the same lie I'd told the doctor. I went to the library, shelving books slowly and carefully, avoiding heavier volumes requiring 2 hands. At home, Jessica mocked my splint constantly. She called me clumsy, made jokes about me being accident-prone, seemed to find my struggle with everyday tasks endlessly amusing. Sharon said nothing about what had happened, acted as if that night had never occurred. They had successfully gaslit the entire situation, rewriting history so I was simply the careless one who had hurt herself. But I was not the same person I'd been before that dinner. Something in me had calcified, hardened into cold determination. I began to plan. First, I documented everything. I used my phone to photograph my injured arm from every angle, capturing swelling, bruising, how my fingers were still slightly discolored. I photographed medical discharge papers from the emergency clinic, the prescription for painkillers, the $800 bill. I kept all these images in a password-protected folder on my phone, backed up to a cloud service no one in my family knew about. Second, I recorded conversations. I discovered my phone had a voice memo app, and I started leaving it running during family interactions, tucked in my pocket or sitting seemingly innocently on the kitchen counter. I captured Sharon's dismissive comments about my injury, Jessica's cruel jokes, and most importantly, I recorded a conversation where my mother explicitly told a neighbor who asked about my arm that I had been clumsy and fallen, adding that I was always so dramatic about minor injuries. But my most significant discovery came about 2 weeks after the incident, when Sharon ordered me to clean out the attic storage space. It was a task I'd been avoiding for months, the attic being hot, dusty, and full of boxes of old junk. With my arm still in a splint, climbing the narrow pull-down stairs was difficult, but I managed it, driven by a desire to stay away from Jessica. The attic was exactly as bad as I remembered, crammed with cardboard boxes smelling of mildew, old furniture covered in dusty sheets, and stacks of forgotten belongings. I worked slowly, sorting through boxes one-handed, deciding what could be thrown away. I was about 3 hours into the task, hot and frustrated and covered in grime, when I found it, a small cardboard box, different from the others, tucked away in the far corner behind a broken floor lamp. It was taped shut, but the tape had yellowed and loosened with age. When I pulled it open, I found letters, dozens of them. Envelopes addressed to me in a man's handwriting, postmarked from various West Virginia towns, dating back more than 15 years. None had been opened. My hands shook as I pulled out the first letter and carefully slid open the envelope. The letter inside was written on simple lined paper, the handwriting neat and careful. It began, "Dear Emma," and was signed, "Love, Dad." I sat down hard on the dusty attic floor, my mind reeling. My biological father. The man Sharon had always told me had abandoned us when I was a baby, who had never cared enough to stay in touch, who had walked away and never looked back. That was the story I had grown up with, the narrative that had shaped my understanding of myself and my worth. If my own father didn't want me, I must be fundamentally unlovable, right? But here were letters, years of letters. I tore through them one by one, reading with growing disbelief and rage. My father, Mark, had not abandoned me at all. He had written consistently, sent birthday cards and Christmas gifts, tried desperately to maintain contact. In his letters, he talked about his life as a carpenter in a small West Virginia town, about the furniture he built, about how much he missed me and wanted to see me. He wrote that he had tried to get custody, tried to arrange visits, but Sharon had blocked every attempt, returned his child support checks, told him I didn't want to see him. The most recent letter was only 3 years old, postmarked from a town called Harper's Ferry. In it, my father wrote that he wasn't giving up hope, that whenever I was ready to reach out, he would be there. He included his phone number, his email address, his home address. He was leaving the door open, even after years of silence. I sat in that hot attic and cried, not from pain but from grief so deep it felt like drowning. My mother had stolen my father from me. She had let me believe I was unwanted, when the truth was that I had a parent who loved me, who had fought for me, who had never stopped trying. And she had done it for what? To punish him for leaving her? To maintain complete control over me? This changed everything. I was not alone. I had family beyond this toxic household, someone who might actually care about my well-being. I carefully gathered all the letters, put them in a plastic shopping bag I found in the attic, and hid them under my mattress. Then I continued cleaning the attic as if nothing had happened, my mind racing with new possibilities. That night, after everyone was asleep, I sat cross-legged on my bed and read through every single letter again, piecing together a picture of a man I barely remembered. I had vague memories of my early childhood, of strong arms lifting me up, of a deep voice singing lullabies, of the smell of sawdust and wood polish. But Sharon had worked hard to erase those memories, to convince me they were dreams or wishful thinking. Now I knew the truth. My father was out there, and he wanted me in his life. The question was, did I have the courage to reach out to him? And if I did, what would I say? I decided to wait. I needed to be strategic about this, needed to make sure I had all my pieces in place before making any major moves. But knowing that I had an option, that there was someone out there who might offer me a place to stay if things got worse, gave me strength I hadn't had before. Meanwhile, I began to observe Jessica more carefully, paying attention to her routines and relationships. I quickly noticed something interesting. Jessica was careless with her phone, often leaving it unlocked on the kitchen counter while she showered or did her makeup. I started checking it when I had the opportunity, just quick glances to see what she was up to. What I found was illuminating. Jessica's relationship with Preston was built on a foundation of lies. She had created an entire false persona, telling him she was a successful interior designer with a portfolio of clients and projects. In reality, she spent her days shopping online, watching reality TV, and taking selfies. I found text conversations where she dodged his questions about her work, where she made up fake meetings and consultations. I also discovered that Preston was planning something big. He had been talking to his friends about proposing to Jessica at her upcoming birthday party, a lavish event he was organizing at an upscale rooftop restaurant in Pittsburgh. He had already bought a ring, made reservations for 30 guests, planned every detail. He was completely committed to a woman who had been lying to him since the day they met. An idea began to form. A way to expose Jessica's lies, to watch her carefully constructed facade crumble, to make sure she faced consequences for once in her privileged life. It would require timing, precision, and a bit of luck. But I had 6 weeks until I left for Austin, 6 weeks to put my plan into motion. I spent hours researching, using the computers at the library during my shifts to look up similar situations, to understand the best approach. I created a new email account, completely untraceable to me, and began crafting the perfect message. It needed to sound professional, legitimate, and interesting enough that Preston would take it seriously. After several drafts, I settled on this. Dear Mr. Harrison, my name is Amanda Chen, and I am a features writer for Modern Spaces magazine, a publication focused on emerging talent in interior design. We came across your girlfriend Jessica's work through social media and were quite impressed by her aesthetic and apparent success at such a young age. We would love to feature her in our upcoming Rising Stars issue, which highlights designers under 30 making an impact in their local markets. To move forward with this feature, we would need to verify some information about her business, including her company name, portfolio website, and a list of recent projects. We understand you must be very proud of her accomplishments, and we thought you might be able to help us coordinate this opportunity. We are hoping to finalize our interview subjects by the end of this month. Please let me know if you would be willing to facilitate an introduction. Best regards, Amanda Chen, features writer, Modern Spaces magazine. It was perfect. Professional enough to be believable, vague enough to avoid too many specifics that could be fact-checked, and perfectly timed to arrive just before Jessica's birthday party. Preston would be proud and excited, would want to tell Jessica about this amazing opportunity, and the entire house of cards would collapse. I scheduled the email to send 5 days before the party, giving Preston enough time to approach Jessica but not enough time for her to come up with an elaborate cover story. Then I waited, maintaining my quiet presence in the house, going to work, attending my follow-up medical appointments, and counting down the days. My arm healed slowly. The splint was replaced with a proper cast, bright blue fiberglass from my hand to my elbow. The doctor said I'd been lucky, the bone was aligning well, and I should have full function back within a couple of months. But even as my physical injury mended, the emotional wound only deepened. Every day in that house felt like poison. Jessica's birthday party was scheduled for a Saturday evening in mid-November. Preston had invited his parents, several friends from the car dealership business, and some of Jessica's old high school acquaintances. Sharon had bought a new dress and had her hair professionally styled. Jessica had spent weeks planning her outfit, a tight silver dress that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. I was not invited. This didn't surprise me, though Sharon had made a point of telling me I needed to stay home in case there were any emergencies that needed handling. Translation: I was to be available to take care of any problems that arose while they were gone, like I always was. I told them that was fine. I had to work at the diner anyway, I said, picking up an extra evening shift. This was true. I had specifically requested to work that night, wanting to be far away when everything exploded, wanting an alibi that had nothing to do with me. The day before the party, I confirmed that my email had been sent. I checked the fake account and saw that Preston had already responded, thanking Amanda Chen for the interest and saying he would love to help coordinate. He asked for a phone number to discuss details. I didn't respond. The seed had been planted. That was enough. Saturday arrived. I woke early, worked my morning shift at the diner, came home briefly to change clothes, then headed back for the evening shift. Jessica and Sharon left the house around 6, both dressed up and excited, talking about the expensive restaurant and the surprise Preston had planned. Neither said goodbye to me. I was refilling coffee for a table of regulars around 8:30 when my phone buzzed in my pocket. A text from a number I didn't recognize, and of Jessica's friends. Someone who had my number from years ago when we were all in high school. Oh my god, you need to see what's happening at Jessie's party. It's a disaster. There was a video attached. I played it with the volume low, leaning against the industrial refrigerator in the back of the kitchen where no one could see me. The video was shaky, clearly recorded on someone's phone, but the audio was clear enough. It showed Preston, handsome in a suit, standing in the middle of the crowded restaurant, holding a microphone. He was talking about Jessica, about how proud he was of her, about her successful design business, and how she was such an inspiration. The crowd was smiling, glasses of champagne raised. Then Preston said something about a magazine wanting to feature her. How exciting that was, and could Jessica tell everyone about this amazing opportunity? The camera swung to Jessica's face. She looked pale, her smile frozen. People were turning to her expectantly, and you could see the panic in her eyes. Someone shouted, "Speech! Speech!" And Jessica stood up shakily. I don't know what you're talking about," she said, her voice barely audible. Preston laughed, thinking she was being modest. "The magazine, honey. Modern Spaces magazine. They emailed me about featuring you in their Rising Stars issue. They wanted your portfolio and company information." The silence that followed was excruciating. Jessica's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. Someone in the crowd, one of Preston's business associates, pulled out his phone and started typing. "Modern Spaces magazine, let me look them up." "Wait," Jessica said, her voice rising. "I can explain." But she couldn't explain. The video showed Preston's face changing from proud and happy to confused, then to something darker as understanding began to dawn. One of his friends, the one who had been searching on his phone, spoke up. Dude, I can't find any magazine by that name. And I'm searching for Jessica's design company, but nothing's coming up. The restaurant had gone completely silent. You could see Sharon in the background, frozen with her champagne glass halfway to her lips, her face a mask of horror. Preston turned to Jessica, and even through the grainy phone video, you could see the betrayal in his eyes. Jessica, he said quietly, do you actually have an interior design business? The video ended there, but I didn't need to see more. I could imagine the rest. The confrontation, the admission, the public humiliation as Preston realized he'd been dating a liar, that everything she had told him about herself was fiction. I felt a savage satisfaction bloom in my chest, dark and fierce. This was just the beginning. I finished my shift at the diner in a daze, mechanically serving customers and clearing tables. Around 10 o'clock, I saw Sharon's car pull into our driveway from the diner window. I decided to walk home slowly, taking the long route, giving them time to settle in before I arrived. When I finally walked through the front door just before 11, the house was in chaos. Jessica was in the living room, mascara streaking down her face, still wearing her silver dress, screaming into her phone at someone. Sharon was pacing back and forth, drinking wine straight from the bottle, her carefully styled hair now disheveled. They both turned to look at me as I entered, and the hatred in their eyes was palpable. Jessica threw her phone at me. It missed, hitting the wall beside my head and clattering to the floor. You did this! She shrieked. You ruined everything. Preston dumped me in front of everyone. His parents were there. Do you know how humiliated I am? I said nothing. I just stood there, my face carefully neutral, my broken arm still in its cast hanging at my side. Sharon advanced on me, her face red with rage. How could you be so vindictive? My mother hissed. Your own sister. Preston was going to propose. Do you understand what you've thrown away? He could have taken care of all of us. I didn't do anything, I said calmly, though my heart was racing. I was at work all evening. You can check with my manager. Don't lie to me, Sharon shouted. This has your fingerprints all over it. That fake email, that fake magazine. Who else would have done it? I looked at my mother, at my stepsister still sobbing dramatically on the couch, and I felt nothing but cold contempt. Maybe Jessica shouldn't have lied to her boyfriend about having a career. Maybe this is just the consequence of her own actions catching up with her. Jessica lunged at me, but this time I was ready. I stepped aside, and she stumbled, nearly falling. Sharon caught her, and they both stood there glaring at me with such venom that I realized something important. I was not safe here anymore. Whatever fragile tolerance they had maintained while I was useful to them had shattered. I was now the enemy. I'm going to bed, I said quietly, and I walked to my room before either of them could respond. I locked my door that night, something I had never done before. I lay in bed, listening to them rage and cry in the other room, making plans, blaming me for everything. And I smiled in the darkness, because they had no idea what was coming next. The next morning, I woke before dawn and packed a small duffel bag with essential items, clothes, toiletries, my laptop, important documents, and the letters from my father. I took the bag and hid it in the trunk of my old Honda, the beat-up car I'd bought for $500 3 years ago, and kept running through sheer determination and YouTube repair videos. Then I went back inside, made coffee, and waited for Sharon to wake up. When she finally emerged from her bedroom around 9, hungover and angry, I was sitting at the kitchen table with my phone in front of me. We need to talk, I said. I have nothing to say to you, Sharon spat. You've destroyed this family. No, I replied calmly. You did that all by yourself. But that's not what we need to talk about. I'm leaving. I'm taking the job in Austin, and I'm moving in 2 weeks instead of 6. Sharon laughed, a bitter, harsh sound. You're not going anywhere. You have responsibilities here. Bills to pay. Actually, I don't, I said. I've already contacted the utility companies and taken my name off the accounts. As of next week, you'll be responsible for your own electricity, water, and internet. I've also spoken to the landlord about removing myself from the lease when it renews next month. This is your house, your responsibility, not mine. The color drained from Sharon's face. You can't do that. We can't afford this place without your income. You're going to leave us homeless? You should have thought of that before you let Jessica assault me and then covered it up, I said, my voice hard. Before you spent decades lying to me about my father. Before you made it clear that I only mattered to you as a source of income. Sharon froze. What are you talking about, your father? I pulled out one of the letters from my pocket and slid it across the table. I found them. All of them. 20 years of letters you hid from me. 20 years of you making me believe I was abandoned, when the truth was you were the one doing the abandoning. Sharon picked up the letter, her hands shaking. For a moment I saw something like fear in her eyes. Then her face hardened. He didn't deserve you. He left me, left us. Everything I did was to protect you from him. No, I said. Everything you did was to punish him and control me, but that's over now. I'm leaving, and I'm never coming back. If you walk out that door, Sharon said, her voice low and threatening. "You're dead to me. You'll have no family. You'll be alone." I stood up, picked up my phone, and looked at her with the same cold indifference she had shown me my entire life. I've always been alone. At least now I'm free. I walked out of the kitchen, got in my car, and drove away. I pulled into a fast food parking lot a few miles down the road and sat there, my hands gripping the steering wheel, my whole body shaking with adrenaline and fear and exhilaration. I pulled out my phone and looked at the most recent letter from my father, the one with his current contact information. It was now or never. I dialed the number before I could talk myself out of it. The phone rang 3 times, then a man's voice answered, deep and cautious. "Hello?" "Hi," I said, my voice cracking. "This is Emma. I think I'm your daughter." There was a long silence, then I heard a sound like a choked sob. "Emma? Oh my God. Emma. I've been waiting for this call for 20 years. I started crying then, really crying, all the grief and loss and loneliness I'd been holding in for so long pouring out of me. "I just found your letters. I didn't know. She told me you didn't want me." "That's not true, sweetheart. That was never true. I've always wanted you. Always." His voice was thick with emotion. "Where are you? Are you okay?" "I'm in Pennsylvania. I need to get away from here. I don't have anywhere to go." "You come here," he said immediately, firmly. "You come to me. I'll send you the address right now. How far are you from Harper's Ferry?" "About 4 hours." "Then you drive carefully and you come straight here. I'll have dinner ready. We have a lot of catching up to do." Harper's Ferry was a small historic town nestled in the mountains where West Virginia, and Maryland met. It was beautiful in a way that took my breath away, with narrow streets lined with old brick buildings and the Potomac River winding through the valley. My father's address led me to a modest craftsman-style bungalow with a neat front yard and a workshop visible behind it. I sat in my car for 5 minutes, staring at the house, terrified. What if this was a mistake? What if we had nothing in common? What if he was disappointed by who I'd become? But then the front door opened, and a man stepped onto the porch. He was in his early 50s, with brown hair going gray at the temples, wearing jeans and a flannel shirt. He was tall and broad-shouldered, and when he saw my car, his face broke into a smile so genuine and full of joy that it made my chest ache. I got out slowly, suddenly self-conscious about my cast, my work clothes that smelled like coffee and grease, my messy hair. But Mark didn't seem to notice any of that. He walked down the porch steps and stopped a few feet away, his eyes glistening with tears. "Emma," he said, his voice full of wonder. "Look at you. You look just like your grandmother." I didn't remember making the decision to move. One moment I was standing frozen by my car, and the next I was in his arms, hugging him tightly, breathing in the smell of sawdust and wood polish that I suddenly remembered from my earliest childhood. He held me like I was precious, like I was something he'd been afraid he would never get back. We stood there for a long time, and when we finally pulled apart, we were both crying and laughing at the same time. Mark wiped his eyes and gestured toward the house. "Come on, let me show you your room. I've kept it ready, just in case you ever came." The inside was warm and welcoming, filled with handmade wooden furniture that showcased incredible craftsmanship. There were bookshelves, a coffee table with intricate inlaid designs, chairs that looked both beautiful and comfortable. Mark led me down a short hallway to a small bedroom that had clearly been prepared with care. There was a bed with a handmade quilt, a dresser, and a desk by the window overlooking the backyard. "I know it's not much," Mark said almost apologetically, "but it's yours for as long as you need it." "It's perfect," I whispered, and I meant it. This small, simple room felt more like home than any space in Sharon's house ever had. We spent the evening talking. Mark made spaghetti with meat sauce, apologizing for his limited cooking skills, and we sat at his kitchen table until well past midnight. He told me about his life, about his work as a carpenter and furniture maker, about his attempts to stay connected to me over the years, about the pain of being shut out by Sharon. I told him everything too, holding nothing back. The years of being treated like a servant, Jessica's assault and my broken arm, the lies and manipulation and constant belittling. When I told him about my arm, Mark's face went dark with anger. "She hit you? And your mother did nothing?" "Worse than nothing," I said. "She told me not to report it, said I would ruin Jessica's future." Mark was quiet for a long moment, his jaw tight. Then he looked at me seriously. "Emma, what happened to you is not okay. It's assault. You have evidence, right? Medical records?" "Yes," I said. "I documented everything. I took pictures, kept the bills, even recorded some conversations." "Good," Mark said firmly, "because you have options here. You don't have to let them get away with this. I know a lawyer in Charleston, a good one. If you want to pursue this legally, I'll help you. I'll pay for it if necessary." I stared at him, surprised. The idea of actually taking legal action against Jessica and Sharon had occurred to me, but I dismissed it as too difficult, too expensive, too risky. But here was my father, offering to support me, to help me hold them accountable. I need to think about it, I said slowly. But thank you. Just knowing I have that option means everything. That night, I slept better than I had in months. When I woke up, sunshine was streaming through the window, and I could hear Mark moving around in the kitchen, making coffee. I got dressed and joined him, and we sat on the back porch watching deer graze at the edge of his property. I have a job offer in Austin, I told him. A good one. But I'm not sure what to do now. Everything's changed. Mark sipped his coffee thoughtfully. Austin's a long way from here, but it's also a great opportunity, and you earned it. Don't let Sharon and Jessica take that away from you. If you want to go to Austin, you should go, but you'll always have a home here with me, anytime you need it. His words made me tear up again. The unconditional support, the respect for my choices, the simple acknowledgement that I mattered was everything I'd been missing my entire life. Over the next week, I settled into a routine in Harper's Ferry. I called the company in Austin and explained that I had some family matters to handle and asked if I could delay my start date by 2 weeks. They were understanding and agreed. I spent my days helping Mark in his workshop, learning about his craft, and talking about everything and nothing. But I also spent time thinking seriously about what I wanted to do about Jessica and Sharon. Mark introduced me to his lawyer friend, a sharp woman named Patricia Chen, who specialized in personal injury and family law. I met with her at her office in Charleston and laid out everything that had happened. Patricia reviewed my evidence carefully: the medical records, the photos of my injuries, the hospital bills, the recordings where Sharon admitted to covering up the incident. She looked up at me with a serious expression. "You have a strong case for assault and battery against Jessica," she said. "The evidence is clear. She physically assaulted you, causing injury that required medical treatment. The fact that your mother tried to cover it up and pressured you not to report it could also be grounds for a civil suit against her for enabling the assault and causing additional emotional distress." "What would happen if I pursued this?" I asked. "Criminal charges would likely result in a conviction for assault in the 3rd degree, possibly 2nd degree given the injury. Jessica would face fines, possible jail time, though more likely probation for a first offense, and she would have a criminal record. The civil suit would seek monetary damages for your medical expenses, pain and suffering, and emotional distress. Given the evidence, you would very likely win." I sat with that information for a moment, imagining Jessica with a criminal record, Sharon being forced to pay damages. Part of me wanted it desperately, wanted them to face real consequences for how they'd treated me. But another part just wanted to be done with them, to move on and leave them in the past. "Can I have some time to think about it?" I asked. Patricia nodded. "Of course, but don't wait too long. There are statutes of limitations on these things. You have time, but not forever." Over dinner that night, I talked it through with Mark. He listened carefully, and then said something that stuck with me. "The question isn't whether they deserve to face consequences," he said. "They do. The question is what will give you closure and allow you to move forward. Some people need to see justice served to heal. Others find that the best revenge is simply living well and leaving toxic people behind. Only you can decide which one you need." I thought about that for days, and eventually, I realized what I wanted. I wanted justice, yes, but more than that, I wanted them to understand what they'd lost. I wanted them to see me thriving without them, to know that I'd built a better life than they could ever take away. I called Patricia and told her I wanted to move forward with both the criminal charges and the civil suit. She filed the paperwork, and within 2 weeks, Jessica was served with criminal charges for assault. Sharon was served with a civil complaint for enabling the assault and causing emotional distress. The fallout was immediate and spectacular. My phone blew up with calls and texts from both of them, which I ignored. Sharon tried to reach me through my work at the diner, but I'd already given notice and was working my final shifts. Jessica left me voicemails that ranged from threatening to sobbing, but I saved them all as additional evidence. The criminal case moved surprisingly quickly. Jessica tried to claim it was an accident, that I'd fallen on my own, but the evidence was overwhelming. The doctor's notes about the injury pattern, the recordings where Sharon essentially admitted to the cover-up, the text messages from Jessica mocking my injury afterward, it all painted a clear picture. Jessica's public defender advised her to take a plea deal. She was convicted of assault in the 2nd degree and sentenced to 18 months probation, 200 hours of community service, mandatory anger management classes, and court costs. She now had a criminal record that would follow her for the rest of her life. The civil suit took longer, but Patricia was relentless. She not only went after damages for my medical expenses and pain and suffering, but she also built a case around the emotional abuse and financial exploitation I'd endured for years. She subpoenaed our household financial records and showed that I'd paid over $40,000 in household expenses over 3 years, while receiving no compensation and being treated as live-in help. Sharon tried to fight it, hiring a cheap lawyer who was no match for Patricia. The evidence was too strong, the pattern too clear. When we finally went to trial, the jury deliberated for less than 2 hours before finding in my favor. They awarded me $75,000 in damages, medical expenses, back payment for the household contributions I'd made, and compensation for emotional distress. Sharon and Jessica didn't have $75,000. They didn't have a fraction of that. To pay the judgment, Sharon was forced to sell the house she'd been so proud of, the house she'd maintained as a symbol of middle-class respectability. It sold for less than she owed on the mortgage, and after paying off the debt and the judgment, they were left with almost nothing. I heard through mutual acquaintances that they moved into a cramped 2-bedroom apartment in a less desirable part of town. Jessica was working as a cashier at a grocery store, the only job she could get with her criminal record and no actual skills. Sharon had to take on extra shifts at the dental office just to make rent. Their carefully constructed image of success had crumbled completely. I felt no guilt about it. They had made their choices, and now they were living with the consequences. I stayed in Harper's Ferry for 2 more months, healing emotionally and physically. My cast came off, and I regained full use of my arm through physical therapy. I spent my days working in Mark's workshop, learning carpentry, talking about everything from philosophy to our favorite movies. He taught me how to use his tools, how to see the grain in wood, how to build something beautiful and lasting with your own hands. We also spent time catching up on 2 decades of lost connection. Mark showed me photo albums from my early childhood, pictures of me as a toddler I'd never seen, videos of birthday parties and Christmas mornings that Sharon had told me didn't exist. He told me stories about my grandmother, who died when I was 5, and about his side of the family that I'd been cut off from. Through him, I met cousins, aunts, and uncles who welcomed me with open arms. They had known about me all along, had wanted to be part of my life, but Sharon had blocked all contact. Now, suddenly, I had an extended family who actually cared about me, who were interested in my life and my dreams. When December came and it was time for me to leave for Austin, I was nervous, but also excited. Mark drove me to the airport, helped me with my bags, and hugged me tightly before I went through security. "I'm so proud of you," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Go build that life you deserve. But remember, you always have a home here with me." "I know," I said, "and thank you. For everything, for being the father I always needed." Austin was everything I'd hoped for and more. The tech company was dynamic and innovative, my coworkers were smart and friendly, and the work itself was challenging in the best possible way. I started as a junior developer but quickly proved myself, taking on additional responsibilities and learning new skills. I rented a small apartment in South Austin, nothing fancy but it was mine. I decorated it exactly how I wanted, bought my first pieces of real furniture, and settled into a routine that revolved around my own needs and desires for the first time in my adult life. I also started therapy. Patricia had recommended it during our work together, and I knew she was right. I had years of trauma and dysfunction to work through, patterns of thinking and behavior that had been ingrained by my toxic family. I needed to learn how to set healthy boundaries, how to recognize my own worth, how to build relationships based on mutual respect rather than obligation. My therapist, Dr. Santos, helped me understand that what I'd experienced was not just garden-variety family conflict. It was emotional abuse, financial exploitation, and ultimately physical violence. She helped me see that I hadn't been wrong to leave, that I hadn't been selfish or cruel. I had been surviving. Over the following year, I threw myself into building a new life. I got promoted at work, nearly doubling my salary. I made friends with some of my coworkers and started going to tech meetups and social events. I took up rock climbing and discovered I loved it. I visited Mark regularly, flying back to West Virginia every few months, and he came to visit me in Austin once. I also started dating. It was terrifying at first, after years of watching Jessica's toxic relationship dynamics and having no healthy models for what love should look like. But I met a man named Daniel at a coffee shop, and we started talking about the book I was reading. He was an architect, thoughtful and kind, with a dry sense of humor that made me laugh. We took things slowly, and he was patient with my trust issues and my tendency to over-explain myself. After 6 months of dating, I told him everything about my past. I expected him to be scared off, to decide I was too damaged or too complicated. But instead, he pulled me close and said, "You survived all of that and still became someone kind and strong. That's incredible." We moved in together after a year, renting a small house with a yard on the east side of town. Daniel proposed a few months later, and I said yes without hesitation. We planned a small wedding, just close friends and family, and Mark walked me down the aisle with tears streaming down his face. 2 years after I left Pennsylvania, my life was unrecognizable from what it had been. I had a career I loved, a partner who respected and cherished me, a father who had welcomed me back with open arms, and a sense of peace I'd never known before. The girl who'd been on her knees fixing a broken dishwasher, accepting insults and abuse as the price of having a place to live, felt like a different person entirely. Sharon and Jessica remained in my past, blocked on all forms of communication. I had no interest in their lives, no curiosity about whether they'd learned anything or changed. They had made their choices, and I had made mine. The door between us was closed and locked. but there was one more thing I wanted to do. One final gesture, not out of cruelty but out of a desire to demonstrate just how completely I'd moved on. Daniel and I bought a house. It wasn't a mansion, but it was beautiful, charming craftsman bungalow with a large backyard, hardwood floors, and big windows that filled the rooms with light. Mark came to visit and spent 2 weeks helping us renovate, building custom furniture for our living room and a beautiful dining table that seated 8. When the house was finished, we threw a housewarming party. Our friends came, Daniel's family came, Mark came with some of my newfound cousins. We filled the house with laughter and food and music, and I felt truly, completely happy. After the party, I sat down at that beautiful dining table my father had made and wrote a letter. Not a long one, just a single page. I explained that I'd built a good life, that I was happy, that I'd found real family who actually cared about me. I included a photo from the wedding, me in a simple white dress, Daniel in a suit, both of us grinning at the camera with Mark standing between us, one hand on each of our shoulders. I put the letter and photo in an envelope and mailed it to Sharon's apartment address, which I'd found through public records. I didn't include a return address. I didn't want a response. The letter said simply, "Dear Mom, I thought you might want to know that I'm doing well. I have a career I love, a husband who respects me, and a father who actually wanted me. This is what a real family looks like. I hope you've learned something from all of this, but honestly, whether you have or not doesn't matter to me anymore. I'm finally free. Emma." I never heard back from her. I didn't expect to. The letter wasn't really for her anyway. It was for me, a final closing of that chapter of my life. A few months later, Mark forwarded me a Facebook post he'd stumbled across. Jessica had posted a long, rambling status about how hard her life was, how unfair it was that she had to work minimum wage jobs, how her family had abandoned her. The comments were mostly from people telling her to take responsibility for her own choices. I read it once, then closed the browser and never looked again. 3 years after leaving Pennsylvania, Daniel and I started talking about starting a family of our own. I was nervous about becoming a mother, worried about repeating the patterns I'd grown up with. But Dr. Santos assured me that being aware of those patterns was the first step in breaking them. When I got pregnant, I called Mark immediately. He was overjoyed, already planning what kind of crib he would build for his grandchild. Daniel's parents were equally excited, immediately offering to help in any way we needed. I thought a lot about what kind of parent I wanted to be. I thought about the contrast between Sharon, who had seen me as a burden and a tool, and Mark, who had never stopped trying to be part of my life. I thought about the values I wanted to pass on to my child: kindness, resilience, integrity, and the belief that family is defined by love and respect, not just blood. My daughter was born on a sunny April morning, and we named her Grace. Mark flew down to meet her when she was 2 days old, and the photo of him holding her for the first time, tears streaming down his weathered face, is one of my most treasured possessions. Being a mother transformed me in ways I hadn't expected. Holding Grace, feeding her, watching her grow, I felt both the weight of responsibility and the lightness of joy. I was determined to give her everything I hadn't had: unconditional love, consistent support, and the freedom to become whoever she wanted to be. Now, 5 years after I left that toxic house in Pennsylvania, I can honestly say I've built a life beyond anything I imagined that night when I lay on the floor with a broken arm, believing I would never escape. I wake up every morning in a home filled with love. I go to work at a job where my skills are valued and I am respected. I come home to a partner who sees me as an equal and a daughter who thinks I hung the moon. The scars are still there, emotional ones that probably will never fully fade. I still have moments of doubt, still catch myself apologizing too much or worrying that I'm asking for too much. But I'm working on it, every day, in therapy, and in the conscious choices I make about how to live my life. Sharon and Jessica are footnotes now, cautionary tales I sometimes share with friends when we talk about toxic family dynamics. They no longer have power over me, they no longer define who I am or what I deserve. Sometimes, late at night when everyone else is asleep, I think about sending them an updated photo. Me and Daniel and Grace and Mark, all of us together in our backyard, smiling under the Texas Sunday. I think about adding a note that says, "This is what it looks like when you choose love over control, when you build something real instead of maintaining an illusion." But I never do. Because the truth is, I don't need them to see my happiness to validate it. I don't need their acknowledgement or their regret. Their approval, which I chased so desperately for so many years, means nothing to me now. The best revenge is not making them pay, though they did pay. The best revenge is not proving them wrong, though I did that too. The best revenge is simply this: living a full, joyful, authentic life, surrounded by people who genuinely care about me, free from the weight of their expectations and their cruelty. I am not the girl who fixed broken dishwashers with tip money anymore. I am not the shadow who crept through the house trying to avoid conflict. I am Emma, wife and mother and daughter and professional and friend. I am someone who survived, who fought back, who rebuilt from ashes, and who finally learned that I was always worthy of love and respect. I just needed to find the courage to demand it. And now, every single day, I live the truth I had to learn the hard way. You cannot change toxic people, but you can change your own life. You can walk away. You can build something better. You can rise from the ashes and become more than they ever told you that you could be. That is my story. That is how I went from victim to victor. And I would do it all again, every painful step, because it led me here, to this beautiful life I built with my own 2 hands.